Hello everybody and welcome! While the Kerbal space program franchise continues to be abandoned by its new owners, a lot of progress has been made on Kitten's space agency, the independent spiritual successor to KSP, which a lot of former developers of the original are working on at Studio Rocketworks. Recently, on the KSA Discord server, CAO Dean Hall talked about the first upcoming public alpha release, which is going to be free for everyone to try out. There's no date for this yet, but I thought it might be a good idea to talk about some things we can expect and what has been added since the last time we looked at the progress of the game. If this type of content is your jam, even if you don't like cats, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We're right at the edge of crossing that magic 100,000 subscriber mark, and there's some exciting stuff coming up soon that's not KSA, but related to the Kerbal, let's say, universe, so make sure you don't miss that. But now, let's look at 5 things to expect from Kitten Space Agency's first alpha release. Free for all! As stated multiple times in the past, the first public early access builds for KSA are going to be free. And when the developers say free, they mean totally free, not freemium, not free with ads or microtransactions. I saw a lot of people commenting into that vein when I did my video on Rocketworks' plan to make even the finished version of KSA free. It appears that all of you have been conditioned into a reality where games without a price have to have some malicious money-grabbing mechanic included inside. I guess you've been burned too often by greedy publishers, so I can't blame you. But as someone coming from an age when freeware existed for real, this was kind of astonishing to me. I guess I'm getting old. So far, there is no indication that this is ever going to be the case for KSA, especially since the developers want to get it into schools as a learning tool. But that is still a long time away. For now, the very first build the public will be able to get their hands on is going to be an alpha, a very much unfinished version of the game. And they want to use it to get feedback on a lot of things, so it makes sense to give away these early versions. Even when it's still an alpha, it might surprise you that I think it is going to be better than KSP in some areas. Yep, you heard that right. Even in an early alpha state, I personally believe that some of the things we're going to see are going to be better in KSA than in the original space game pioneer Kerbal space program. At least before adding mods to the latter. The first thing we're probably going to notice is the stock volumetric cloud implementation. While visual mods can improve KSP dramatically, the stock game does not have that type of eye candy. And with the creator of the fantastic Scatterer mod and volumetric clouds for KSP, BlackRack, being on the development team for Kitten Space Agency, it's no surprise that the game's atmospheres already look fantastic. Something the developers have been highlighting ever since KSA was announced was performance. They have shown off their new way of generating terrain and also how seamless transitions between orbit and surface can be. While the game is still going to be very empty in its alpha stage, moving between planets is going to give us a good indication of what we can expect from the finished game. If it is already smoother than KSP or the ill-fated sequel KSP2, it is going to bode well for future updates. If you like to tweak things quickly and are not afraid of using a keyboard, you will probably be delighted to hear that there's going to be a console in KSA that can be accessed at any time. What exactly it will enable us to do is not yet known, but during our interview, Dean Hall showed off jumping from planet to planet and also changing some parameters for time warp. As someone who has played the original Quake and used its console extensively, this is definitely an improvement over KSP. By the way, I put a link to my interview with Dean in the thing up top and in the description. Another improvement over KSP that the developers recently showed off is the ability of their bespoke framework they use for the game to have vehicles maintain their rotation during time warp. This will remind veteran KSP players of the mod persistent rotation. In KSA, This works out of the box, but it is not yet clear whether or not this will be activated by default. They are still trying to work out how to balance the game between realism and accessibility. And I would assume this balancing is going to continue throughout the development until KSA is finished. Personally, I think this should be a difficulty setting, so players can switch between a more realistic rotation mode and the KSP-style time warp freeze, which I personally use a lot to make my life easier. In theory, you could even change your vehicle's attitude during time warp in KSA, but I hope they will lock that for the time being, because you could accidentally activate your RCS at 1000 times time warp, and that might rip apart more complex vehicles. Which won't be in the alpha, since that version of KSA will be playable, but not a game yet. As stated, the first publicly available version of Kitten Space Agency is going to be an early access alpha build. If you expect a full game, you are going to be disappointed. If you check out the Dev Updates channel on the KSA Discord server, you will see that while there is a UI, it is still very much a work in progress. Yes, there is a nav ball. Yes, there are maneuver nodes, and there is also attitude control with the reaction control systems. But instead of a small plume, at least at time of recording, you only see an arrow. Dean Hall said on the KSA Discord that the game will have already something of a first version of a game loop in the alpha release, but it is going to be very much bare bones. You will probably be able to control a spaceship, but you should not expect to have any type of vehicle editing present in the early public alpha yet. So, if the first public version of KSA is going to be that rudimentary, this means you are probably not the audience. As they have stated multiple times, the developers want to get the first alpha out there so that they get feedback from the modding community early on. One of the things that was promised during early development of Kerbal Space Program 2 was that modders could dive into the game via a modding API and that there will be Lua-based script code to influence every part of the game. Well, come February 2023, and the early access version of KSP2 was put out there without any of that, much of the chagrin of modders who had been waiting for it for years. While it is not going to have a dedicated modding API, it looks like a lot of Kitten Space Agency is going to be moddable. There are a ton of configuration options via XML and TOML files, which the developers showed off in a live stream on Discord back in November. For instance, they added a new asteroid to the solar system in the matter of a couple of minutes. But while the main audience for the first alpha of KSA will be modders, that doesn't mean that us normies are not welcome. No plan survives first contact with the enemy, and no software remains bug-free after first user testing. So even at this early stage, feedback from players is going to be valuable input for the developers. But as players, we need to be aware that this is going to be even less polished than KSP2's first version was. Then again, Rocketworks won't charge a penny for these early builds, so the value proposition is in a completely different league for Kitten Space Agency. But speaking of the kittens in Kitten Space Agency, for the first build there will probably be no kittens. All of you cat phobics out there will be relieved to hear this. While not stated explicitly, we can expect that there will be no playable characters within KSA when the first alpha is made public. Why do I believe this? Here's why. Dean Hall stated on their Discord server that they currently don't have a budget for what he calls fluff yet. He singled out music as an example for such fluff, but having character animations and kitten-shaped astronauts would also fall under this category. So far, everything we have seen of the titular characters was concept art in multiple forms, from a very early sketch to something more elaborate like a fictional game title card within the Steam layout. Which is kind of funny come to think of it, since Dean has stated in no uncertain terms that he does not want the game on Steam. So the biggest question remaining is, when will this alpha version of KSA be available? Unfortunately, there is no easy answer to this. Since the devs want to handle the distribution themselves and also want to set up some way for players to contribute to the game instead of asking for a price, these things still need to be set up before any version of Case A can be provided to the public. Unfortunately, we will have to wait and see until there is more communication on this by Rocketworks. So far, they have been very open and transparent with everything, a breath of fresh air compared to how the development of Case P2 was shrouded in secrecy. What's not a secret is that I really want to use 2025 to grow my channel further. And for this I also have a Patreon, where you can watch all videos ad-free for a small monthly contribution. If you choose one of the higher tiers there or join as a YouTube member, your name will show up here, together with all of these wonderful people. Thank you so much for your support. And at the highest tier you will get early access to videos, usually a few days before they go live here on YouTube, or ad-free for the other tiers on Patreon. Now, let me put the question to you. Even when it is just a bare-bones variant, would you be willing to try out the alpha version of Kitten Space Agency? Are you yourself maybe a modder and interested in how the game's data is structured? What do you want to do with it if you had access? Let me know in the comments below. Whether or not it will have kittens inside, I'm very curious how Case A is going to turn out when I can get my hands on it.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.